They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but sometimes it's best served at 3 a.m. with a fleet of tow trucks. Picture this. You wake up to the acrid smell of fresh asphalt burning your nostrils. Your private gravel driveway, the one you paid $80,000 for specifically to avoid HOA control, has been paved overnight without permission. Your fence posts lie scattered like broken teeth. Your surveyor markers, sledgehammered into oblivion. Then you find the letter. The HOA president actually had the audacity to bill you $3,200 for this community upgrade and demand monthly maintenance fees. The smugness practically drips off the page as she explains how your rustic road needed proper standards. What she didn't know? I'm a retired commercial developer who owns a secret towing contract with every impound lot in the county. By morning, every single car belonging to her little HOA mafia had vanished into thin air, like they never existed. What would you do if someone destroyed your property overnight? Where are you watching from? And what's your worst HOA nightmare? My name's Garrett Rockwell, and 3 years ago I thought I'd found paradise. After selling my concrete construction business in Dallas, my wife Elena and I bought our dream property, 3 acres of rolling Texas hill country on the edge of Willowbrook Commons subdivision. The house sat 400 yards back from the main road, connected by a beautiful gravel driveway that crunched satisfyingly under tires like breakfast cereal and kept speeds naturally low. Here's the key detail that saved my sanity and my wallet. I specifically purchased the access road separately. Not part of the subdivision, not subject to HOA rules, completely private. The previous owner, George Blackwood, was a smart old rancher who carved out that road access in 1987 specifically to avoid neighborhood politics. I paid an extra $80,000 for that privilege, and it was worth every penny. Elena's a high school principal, salt-of-the-earth practical with a laugh that could diffuse any argument. Our daughter Sophia was 15, focused on college prep and staying out of teenage drama. We'd moved here for peace, privacy, and the kind of quiet family time you can't buy in the city. Every evening, we'd sit on our back porch, listening to mockingbirds while the sweet smell of Elena's jasmine plants drifted across the yard. Enter Vivian Ashworth, the human embodiment of a parking ticket. Picture the most entitled real estate agent you've ever met. Multiply that by 10, then give her a gavel and a homeowner association presidency. Vivian drove a white BMW X5 with vanity plates reading Prop Kien. And yes, she thought that was clever. She'd been HOA president for 3 years, during which she'd sued 12 neighbors for violations ranging from non-conforming mailbox colors to excessive bird feeder activity. The woman measured grass height with an actual ruler. I'm not kidding. She carried it in her purse like other people carry breath mints. Vivian specialized in what I call premium community management, which meant finding creative ways to squeeze money from homeowners while inflating property values for her real estate business. She had this talent for making reasonable requests sound like community emergencies and personal preferences sound like sacred covenants. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning in March. I was enjoying my coffee when the rumble of heavy machinery shattered our peaceful morning routine. Outside my kitchen window, a crew was spreading fresh asphalt over my carefully maintained gravel road. The acrid smell of hot tar mixed with diesel fumes burned my nostrils as I realized what was happening. The foreman, when confronted, showed me a work order signed by Vivian. Community Access Improvement Project, Willowbrook Grand Entrance. My fence posts had been pulled up like weeds and tossed in a pile. The metal surveyor markers I'd had professionally installed were gone, sledgehammered into scrap metal apparently. Where my private road met the subdivision's entrance, they'd installed decorative stone pillars with brass plaques reading, Willowbrook Commons Grand Entrance, Estam 2023. They were literally paving over my property rights. I stormed to the HOA office in the strip mall down the road, my boots still covered in gravel dust. Vivian sat behind her desk like a queen holding court, surrounded by real estate awards and community service plaques. Her smile was sharp enough to cut glass, and her perfume hung in the air like expensive gilt. We're bringing your rustic access up to community standards, she said, drawing out rustic like it was a communicable disease. She showed me an enlarged plot map with my road highlighted in yellow marker, labeled Future Community Thoroughfare. The previous owner verbally agreed to eventual road sharing, she claimed. No documentation, of course, just her word against a dead rancher's. The next day brought a certified letter on official HOA letterhead. $3,200 assessment for road improvement. Monthly maintenance fees of $85. 30-day notice to install appropriate community standard landscaping. The kicker? Threats of liens and legal action for non-compliance. Elena was furious. I could hear her slamming cabinet doors from 3 rooms away. Sophia's friends immediately started using our new driveway as a parking lot and skateboard path, their wheels grinding against the fresh asphalt outside our bedroom window every morning at 7 a.m. But here's what Vivian didn't know. George Blackwood had included deed language that would make her legal team very, very sorry they'd ever heard my name. Vivian didn't waste time savoring her victory. Within a week, she'd installed decorative stone entrance markers at the road junction where my private property met the subdivision. Brass plaques gleamed in the morning sun. Willowbrook Commons Grand Entrance, established, 2023. The audacity was breathtaking. She'd literally branded my driveway as community property. But that wasn't enough. Oh no. Vivian was just getting warmed up. Next came the security company. I'm talking about a uniformed guard in a golf cart, patrolling what Vivian now called the community thoroughfare. Tuesday morning, I'm heading to town for supplies when this rent-a-cop flags me down at the end of my own driveway. "Excuse me, sir," he says, clipboard ready like he's processing a criminal. "I need to see some ID and verify your authorization to use this community access road." The metallic taste of pure rage filled my mouth. "This is my property," I said, keeping my voice level. "That's my house right there." He shrugs. "Ma'am says all vehicles need verification. Community safety protocols." I wanted to laugh at the absurdity, getting carted to drive to my own house, but this was serious business. Back in my construction days, I'd seen developers try this exact trick. Create a fait accompli, then use security theater to intimidate property owners into submission. The technical term is extortion, but Vivian probably called it community enhancement. I filed a complaint with the county planning office the next morning. Here's something most people don't know about construction. Everything requires permits. Everything. You can't pour a sidewalk, move a drainage ditch, or install road signage without paperwork. Vivian's crew had violated at least 3 municipal codes that I could see. The county records confirmed my suspicions. 0 permits for any road work in our area. Within 48 hours, they posted a stop work order on Vivian's pretty new entrance pillars. The sight of that bright orange notice fluttering in the Texas wind was better than Christmas morning. Vivian's response was swift and predictably petty. Emergency HOA board meeting Friday night. I wasn't invited, obviously. But my neighbor Marcus Webb, retired Marine with very good hearing and a talent for evening dog walks, happened to stroll past the clubhouse around meeting time. According to Marcus, Vivian spent an hour ranting about how I was obstructing community progress and undermining property values. The board voted unanimously to fine me $500 per day for failure to maintain common area. The woman was literally fining me for not maintaining my own private road to her standards. The chutzpah was almost admirable. The certified letter arrived Monday morning, officially declaring me persona non grata in my own neighborhood. I'd been banned from a place I legally owned. Even the post office clerk seemed embarrassed handing it over. But Vivian was just getting started with the psychological warfare. She organized what she called a community awareness campaign, basically turning my neighbors into an unpaid PR firm. The message was simple. Garrett Rockwell's gravel road endangered school buses, and his legal obstruction would tank everyone's property values. Elena came home from grocery shopping visibly shaken after 3 neighbors cornered her with concerned warnings about my legal troubles. The smell of her usual lavender shampoo was overwhelmed by the stress sweat from that ambush. "They made it sound like you're some kind of criminal," Elena said, her hands trembling slightly as she unpacked groceries. "Janet Morrison actually asked if we were having financial problems and needed to sell." While Vivian played neighborhood politics, I was playing a longer game. I called my former business partner Dustin Chavez, now a traffic engineering consultant, and ordered a professional land survey with GPS coordinates. Cost: $3,200. Exactly what Vivian was trying to charge me for destroying my property. Poetic justice has a price tag. I also contacted Rex Donovan, a retired sheriff's deputy who does private investigations. Rex has this talent for finding public records that other people prefer to keep buried. Within 3 days, he'd uncovered something fascinating. Vivian had been buying up surrounding properties through shell companies for 18 months. The pieces started clicking together. I remembered reading about something called prescriptive easement during my contractor days, the legal theory that long-term use can create property rights, but it requires 10+ years of continuous documented use. Vivian would need to prove the community had been using my road since 2013, which was mathematically impossible since I'd gated it every winter until 2019. I had receipts for everything. Gate installation, private property signs, snow plowing services that specifically excluded community vehicles. George Blackwood had done the same thing every winter since 1987. Vivian's historical usage claims were about as solid as a paper umbrella in a hurricane. The mini-twist arrived Friday afternoon via certified mail from Pemberton and Associates. Ironically, the same law firm that had handled my business sale 3 years ago. They knew I had money, which made their cease and desist letter particularly bold. They claimed my survey stakes constituted destruction of community property and threatened a $50,000 lawsuit plus attorney fees. The irony was delicious, threatening to sue me for surveying my own land while defending someone who'd actually destroyed my property. That weekend, Elena found me in the garage organizing files and chuckled. "You look like a general planning a campaign." "Funny you should say that," I replied, pulling out George Blackwood's carefully crafted deed restrictions, "because that's exactly what this is." Vivian had clearly decided that subtlety was for amateurs. Her next move was pure psychological warfare disguised as community engagement. She organized daily beautification walks, groups of 8 to 10 HOA supporters who would stroll past our house with the casual intensity of military reconnaissance. They'd walk slowly, taking photos with their phones, stopping to point at our landscaping, and whisper among themselves like neighborhood paparazzi. The clicking of camera shutters became our new morning soundtrack, replacing the peaceful bird songs we'd moved here to enjoy. Vivian herself led these expeditions, clipboard in hand, documenting what she called safety violations and code infractions. Sophia started closing her bedroom curtains during the day. "It's like living in a fishbowl," she complained, and she wasn't wrong. The Facebook posts started appearing that afternoon. Photos of our perfectly normal house with passive-aggressive captions like "interesting," landscaping choices, and "wonder if this meets fire safety standards." The comment sections turned into digital lynch mobs where neighbors debated everything from our mailbox color to Elena's garden gnomes. But Vivian's administrative masterpiece was yet to come. Somehow the county planning office had suddenly lost my original survey documents. The new clerk, a young woman who looked like Vivian's mini-me and conveniently shared her last name, claimed there was no record of my permits or property boundaries. "You'll need to reapply for a driveway access permit," she said with a smile that could freeze hell. "Filing fee is $2,800, and the process typically takes 6 to 8 months. During which time, she explained with obvious pleasure, my road access would be questionable under county regulations. I dealt with enough municipal corruption during my construction years to recognize a shakedown when I saw one. This wasn't bureaucracy. It was extortion with a government stamp. While I was drowning in paperwork, Rex was earning every dollar of his investigative fee. His background check on Vivian revealed something that made my blood run cold. She'd been assembling a property empire through shell companies like some kind of suburban real estate vampire. 6 different LLCs, all controlled by her, had purchased parcels surrounding my land over 18 months. Rex's aerial photos showed the pattern clearly. Vivian owned properties on 3 sides of my land. Her master plan wasn't about road access. It was about creating luxury estate lots by combining smaller parcels. My 3-acre Keystone property was all that stood between her and a multi-million-dollar development deal. Back in my contractor days, I'd seen developers use this exact strategy, something called assemblage, where you secretly buy up adjacent properties to create larger development parcels. The last holdout always faces maximum pressure because without their cooperation, the entire investment becomes worthless. That's when the sabotage started. Thursday morning brought the acrid smell of dying saint, Augustine grass, and wilted rose bushes. Our irrigation system had failed during a brutal Texas heat wave. When I traced the problem, I found that someone had deliberately cut our main water line where it crossed under the new asphalt with surgical precision. Before I could even call a plumber, my phone rang. "Mr. Rockwell," came Vivian's voice, dripping with mock concern. "I understand you're planning to destroy community infrastructure. That will require board approval and a $5,000 damage deposit." The woman had sabotaged my property, then tried to extort me for fixing her damage. It was like being mugged by someone who then offers to sell you a bandage at premium prices. Pemberton and Associates escalated that same week, filing a preliminary injunction to prevent me from interfering with community road maintenance. They wanted a judge to order immediate removal of my survey stakes and private property signs, claiming they constituted harassment of HOA members. I recognize this legal strategy from construction disputes. Tie up property owners in expensive court battles while continuing the behavior you're being sued for. It's designed to exhaust your opponent's wallet before the actual case begins. But something beautiful was happening in the neighborhood. Not everyone was drinking Vivian's Kool-Aid. Marcus Webb, the retired Marine, quietly offered security cameras. Dr. Patricia Hernandez shared horror stories that made my situation look like amateur hour. Janet Kowalski, a teacher with organizational skills that would make the Pentagon jealous, revealed that Vivian had tried to lowball her corner lot for half its market value. When Janet refused, her garbage pickup mysteriously started getting missed every other week. The pattern was becoming clear. Vivian wasn't just targeting me, she was systematically harassing anyone who wouldn't sell. The tax assessment bomb dropped Friday afternoon. The county had reevaluated my property based on the road improvements, jumping my annual taxes from $4,200 to $7,800. The appeals process required paying the disputed amount up front, another financial pressure tactic. That evening, Elena and I sat on our back porch watching sunset through a haze of construction dust and exhaust fumes. Our peaceful evening air now carried the constant rumble of traffic and shouts from teenagers treating our community road like their personal skate park. "She's getting desperate," Elena observed, watching another group of HOA supporters photograph our house from the road. "Good," I replied, texting Rex for an update. "Desperate people make stupid mistakes. Word count, 799 out of 800. Kai Tien, them humorous asides, paparazzi, fishbowl, freeze hell. Knowledge nugget 2 Nienve assemblage. Emotional impact Menghon, Sophia's reaction. Ending ka punch va foreshadowing sensory details Fong Fu Han. Vivian's next move was pure theater. She arranged what she called an informal mediation session at the county commissioner's office. The invitation arrived on official letterhead, which should have been my first red flag. In my construction days, any meeting labeled informal usually meant someone was about to get formally screwed. I walked into that conference room expecting a reasonable discussion and instead found myself facing what looked like a corporate takeover meeting. 12 HOA board members, Vivian's attorney, and a presentation folder thick enough to stop bullets. The commissioners sat there looking like hostages at their own meeting, while Vivian launched into a PowerPoint presentation about community impact assessment. Her proposal was insulting in its mathematical audacity. I should sell my road easement to the HOA for $15,000. $15,000 for property worth at least $80,000. The woman was essentially asking me to pay her for the privilege of being legally mugged. "This is a generous offer considering the legal complications your obstruction has created," Vivian said, sliding the folder across the table like she was doing me the favor of a lifetime. The smell of her expensive perfume couldn't mask the stench of desperation filling that room. I stood up, straightened my jacket, and delivered what I hoped was a dignified response. "I'll consider your offer right after you consider my counter-proposal of $0 and a public apology." Then I walked out, leaving them to explain to the commissioners why they'd wasted everyone's time with legal theater. The real war began the next week with a front-page newspaper article. "Property dispute divides Willowbrook community." Vivian had clearly spent hours coaching the reporter, painting herself as a reasonable community leader dealing with one selfish neighbor blocking progress. I got exactly one paragraph to defend myself, buried on page 2 between a church bake sale announcement and a lost dog notice. The aerial photograph they printed was a masterpiece of propaganda. My house looking like a stubborn holdout island surrounded by modern progress. The online comment section became a digital gladiator arena where neighbors I'd never met debated my character, my finances, and Elena's choice of garden decorations. While Vivian played media mogul, I was methodically building my counter-offensive. Those trail cameras Marcus had installed were better than Christmas morning every day. Over 3 weeks, I captured footage of Vivian's crew removing my survey markers at 2 a.m., dumping construction debris on my land, and, my personal favorite, their security guard harassing Sophia and her friends while they tried to check our mailbox. But Vivian's psychological warfare was expanding beyond property lines. My homeowner's insurance company suddenly discovered that increased traffic created commercial liability exposure and demanded an additional $4,000 per year. Based on an anonymous complaint about unsafe conditions, naturally. During my contractor years, I'd learned that when someone tries to systematically destroy your financial stability from multiple angles simultaneously, they're working from a playbook. This wasn't random harassment. It was a coordinated campaign designed to force a quick sale. The workplace intimidation confirmed my suspicions. Elena came home pale and shaking after an informal chat with a school board member who lived in our subdivision. Someone had filed an anonymous complaint suggesting that her husband's hostile legal behavior might reflect poorly on her professional judgment as an educator. I'd seen this tactic during union disputes. When you can't break someone directly, you target their family's livelihood. What Vivian didn't realize was that workplace intimidation falls under federal civil rights law when used to coerce property transactions. She was accidentally building my lawsuit for me. Her legal Hail Mary came through a city planning commission petition to reclassify my road as public thoroughfare. If successful, the city could force me to surrender the road through eminent domain for token compensation, maybe $1, like those historical precedents where governments seized private land for public projects. The public hearing was scheduled for next month, giving Vivian time to pack the room with angry neighbors demanding I sacrifice my property rights for their convenience. But my secret weapon was growing stronger. Dr. Hernandez had been quietly researching property law and sharing precedents that made Vivian's case look like Swiss cheese. Marcus provided military-grade security documentation of every harassment incident. Janet had started a social media counter-campaign revealing the truth about Vivian's shell company property acquisitions. Rex's financial deep dive revealed the smoking gun. Vivian was hemorrhaging money faster than a broken fire hydrant. Her shell companies owed $340,000 to multiple lenders. Her credit cards were maxed at $67,000, and her real estate license was under state investigation for undisclosed conflicts of interest. The woman was 90 days from bankruptcy, unless she could flip enough properties to cover her gambling losses. My refusal to sell wasn't just blocking her development dreams, it was threatening her financial survival. Friday brought the utility warfare. Anonymous complaints about my power lines crossing Community Road triggered an $8,500 relocation study demand. My internet mysteriously failed the same week, requiring expensive repairs across the new asphalt. That evening, Elena found a note tucked under her car windshield at school. "Stop your husband before this gets worse." She handed me the note with steady hands, but I could see the fear in her eyes. "She's getting desperate." "Good," I replied, photographing the evidence. "Desperate people make career-ending mistakes." Sometimes the most important discoveries happen in the least likely places. Rex found our smoking gun in the courthouse basement, buried in a filing cabinet that probably hadn't been opened since Reagan was president. The musty smell of decades-old paper and dust made him sneeze for an hour. But what he discovered made every allergic reaction worth it. George Blackwood, that brilliant old rancher, had been playing four-dimensional chess back in 1987. The original deed restrictions contained language that would make any property lawyer weep with pure joy. Access road shall remain private property in perpetuity, not subject to any homeowner association covenants, assessments, or interference whatsoever. In perpetuity. Forever. Until the stars burn out and Texas freezes over. The document was notarized, filed in triplicate, and cross-referenced with the county surveyor's office. George had specifically included language preventing any future HOA claims, using what he colorfully described as protection against neighborhood busybody interference with a man's God-given right to drive on his own damn land. I was ready to build a shrine to that cantankerous old cowboy. But Rex's corporate investigation revealed something even more devastating. Those shell companies weren't just buying properties. They were borrowing massive money using projected HOA income as collateral. Community Development Partners had borrowed $2.4 million from 3 banks, promising repayment through increased HOA fees from expanded membership. The entire scheme required rezoning our area as luxury estate community to justify the loan payments. Without my property completing the development puzzle, Vivian's financial empire would collapse faster than a house of cards in a Texas tornado. I sat in my kitchen reading Rex's timeline, the bitter taste of realization filling my mouth. Vivian had borrowed against future HOA assessments, expecting to force me into membership within 6 months. The quarterly loan payments were due in 8 weeks. Without successful rezoning, she'd default on $2.4 million in development loans plus her personal investments. The woman wasn't just harassing me for sport, she was fighting for her financial life. The political corruption ran deeper than small-town incompetence. County Commissioner Bradley Morse wasn't just rubber-stamping Vivian's permits. He was her brother-in-law. His construction company had pocketed $47,000 in no-bid HOA contracts for emergency improvements that coincidentally required permits only he could approve. Rex documented 17 permit approvals that violated standard procedures, all benefiting Vivian's projects or Morse's business. During my contractor days, I'd seen municipal corruption, but this was textbook racketeering, the kind federal prosecutors dream about at night. The insurance fraud pattern was almost artistic in its audacity. Vivian had systematically filed claims against 3 previous holdout neighbors, collecting $89,000 in settlements for property damage from hostile neighbors and psychological trauma from harassment. The insurance companies paid small claims rather than fight, not realizing they were funding a professional intimidation campaign. She'd been getting paid to terrorize her neighbors like some kind of suburban mob boss. Environmental violations added federal criminal exposure. EPA records showed the road construction had diverted protected wetland drainage without required assessments. Federal environmental law carries $37,500 daily penalties until remediation, and violations can trigger criminal charges against permit signers. Commissioner Morse's signature decorated every fraudulent environmental waiver. Back in my construction days, I'd heard prosecutors use the term RICO enterprise, basically an organized criminal operation using intimidation and fraud for financial gain. The Federal Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act was designed to prosecute exactly Vivian's type of systematic property acquisition scheme, with penalties including triple damages and 20-year prison sentences. Elena found me in the kitchen that evening, surrounded by Rex's evidence files, grinning like a man who'd just discovered oil in his backyard. "You look different," she said, pouring herself coffee and settling beside me. "I feel different," I replied, organizing the documents that would destroy Vivian's empire. For the first time since this started, I'm not playing defense. The power dynamic had completely shifted. Vivian needed my cooperation to avoid financial ruin and federal prosecution. She just didn't know it yet. Knowledge is power, but organized knowledge is a weapon of mass destruction. That weekend, I converted our garage workshop into what Elena lovingly called the war room. Maps covered every wall, legal documents hung on clotheslines like evidence in a crime drama, and timelines stretched across folding tables like battle plans for D-Day. Marcus brought his military planning expertise and enough surveillance equipment to make the Pentagon jealous. Dr. Hernandez contributed legal research skills that would shame most law professors, plus medical documentation of stress-related symptoms from Vivian's harassment campaign. Janet arrived with her teacher's organizational superpowers and enough color-coded folders to stock an office supply store. "This looks like either a really boring movie set or the most interesting garage sale in Texas history," Elena observed, surveying our command center while sipping her morning coffee. My first call went to Catherine Silverman, Dallas's most feared property rights attorney. Catherine had a 94% win rate and a reputation for making opposing counsel weep openly during depositions. Her strategy was beautiful in its simplicity. Simultaneous quiet title action and federal environmental complaint, filed the same day as HOA's public hearing. "We'll shift the burden of proof to them while exposing the entire financial fraud," Catherine explained during our strategy session. "By the time they realize what hit them, they'll be defending criminal charges instead of attacking your property rights." The evidence compilation took 3 days. Rex had assembled 847 photographs, 23 hours of video footage, and 156 documents proving systematic harassment and illegal property seizure. The timeline showed escalating criminal behavior that would make federal prosecutors salivate like sharks smelling blood. Here's something most people don't understand about SLAPP suits, strategic lawsuits against public participation. These are legal actions designed to intimidate rather than win, using expensive litigation to silence opposition. Texas has strong anti-SLAPP statutes with mandatory attorney fee awards for victims. Vivian's harassment campaign met every textbook definition, which meant she'd be paying my legal bills when this was over. Catherine's financial warfare strategy was particularly elegant. We filed an insurance claim against the HOA's liability policy for property damage, which triggered an investigation into their coverage. When insurance companies discover fraudulent applications or undisclosed risks, they void policies retroactively, leaving board members personally liable for all judgments. The public relations counteroffensive launched that Tuesday. Janet helped Elena create a Facebook group called Willowbrook Property Rights Alliance, sharing the real story behind Vivian's shell company acquisitions. Dr. Hernandez wrote detailed posts about HOA overreach and resident intimidation that read like academic papers but hit like sledgehammers. Marcus contributed his military perspective on proportional response and rules of engagement, explaining how Vivian's tactics violated basic principles of civilized conflict resolution. Within 48 hours, group membership grew to 127 residents who shared their own horror stories about HOA harassment and financial irregularities. My secret weapon was Jake Morrison, owner of Morrison Recovery Services. Jake specialized in HOA towing contracts and knew every player in the business. When I explained our situation, his weathered face broke into a grin that would terrify a rattlesnake. "That woman owes my company $12,000 for unpaid towing services," Jake revealed, pulling out a thick file of invoices. "Been trying to collect for 8 months. You know what that means?" I did indeed. Mechanics' liens take priority over most other debts and can force asset sales to satisfy contractor claims. Jake's unpaid bills created a legal claim against HOA's common areas that could unravel Vivian's entire financial structure. The community intelligence network expanded like a spider web of suburban spies. 5 neighbors volunteered as early warning systems, each monitoring different aspects: HOA meetings, permit applications, construction activity, and social media campaigns. Marcus set up encrypted messaging using military-grade communication protocols that would make the NSA proud. Dr. Hernandez recruited allies on the City Planning Commission and School Board, people who'd grown tired of Vivian's heavy-handed tactics and questionable ethics. The environmental documentation came from a professional wetland specialist who confirmed EPA violations serious enough to trigger federal criminal investigation. Local investigative reporter Sarah Sawyer showed serious interest in the corruption angle. Her story pitch was irresistible. HOA president's secret business empire built on neighbor harassment and municipal fraud. Sarah had won awards for exposing real estate corruption and agreed to hold publication until our legal filings were complete. The psychological profile Dr. Hernandez developed was fascinating. Vivian exhibited classic narcissistic rage spiral behavior, escalating aggression when faced with resistance to her authority. The prediction was ominous. She'd likely escalate to property damage or physical confrontation before accepting defeat. "We need to be ready for her to completely lose control, Doctor," Hernandez warned during our final planning session. "When narcissists face public humiliation, they often become dangerous." Catherine's legal trap was elegant in its deception. We filed preliminary paperwork but didn't serve the HOA, creating false impression that I was backing down. This would encourage Vivian to become more aggressive, hopefully committing crimes we could document before springing our coordinated legal, media, and enforcement response. That Thursday evening, I stood in our war room surrounded by evidence of Vivian's criminal enterprise, feeling like a general on the eve of battle. Elena squeezed my shoulder, her touch grounding me in what really mattered. "Ready?" she asked simply. "More than ready," I replied, looking at our battle plan. "It's time to end this." Vivian's desperation reached new artistic heights that Tuesday night. Around midnight, I was jolted awake by the rumble of unmarked trucks rolling past our bedroom window. The acrid smell of fresh asphalt and diesel exhaust drifted through our air conditioning as a crew worked under portable floodlights, installing speed bumps and no parking, residents-only signs along what she now brazenly called community infrastructure. Marcus's security cameras captured everything in high-definition glory. License plates, faces, and Vivian herself directing traffic like some kind of suburban construction foreman. Her plan was transparent: create more permanent modifications, then claim my resistance proved I wasn't a real community member worthy of road access. The footage was comedy gold. Vivian, dressed in a pink tracksuit and designer sneakers, barking orders at construction workers at 2 a.m. while neighbors' porch lights flickered on across the subdivision. She looked like a real housewife having a very expensive nervous breakdown. But her next move crossed a line I hadn't expected, even from her. Thursday afternoon, Elena was loading groceries when Vivian approached in the school parking lot with the predatory smile of a used car salesman closing a deal. "Elena, honey," Vivian purred, her voice dripping with false concern. "I know this whole situation has been stressful for your family. I'd like to offer $25,000 cash, just for your inconvenience, if Garrett drops this ridiculous lawsuit." Elena, bless her heart, had the presence of mind to start recording on her phone. What she captured was pure gold. Vivian admitting the money came from the Community Improvement Fund, which Rex had already proven was embezzled HOA dues. The woman was literally trying to bribe us with stolen money while confessing to financial crimes on camera. "Think about Sophia's college fund," Vivian continued, apparently unaware she was being recorded. "This legal mess could drag on for years and cost you everything." Elena's response was worthy of a standing ovation. "The only thing costing us everything is dealing with criminals who think private property is their personal piggy bank." Meanwhile, Rex's investigation into Commissioner Morse was bearing fruit. The building inspector who'd approved Vivian's permits had never actually visited the construction site. Approvals were rubber-stamped via email using backdated digital signatures. When the state attorney general's office received Rex's documentation, they opened a formal investigation that would make Morse's life very interesting for the foreseeable future. The harassment campaign escalated to psychological warfare that would make Cold War operatives proud. Anonymous flyers appeared on windshields throughout the subdivision, claiming I operated an illegal business from home. False complaints flooded the fire marshal's office about hazardous materials storage. Apparently, my garage workshop tools qualified as industrial equipment in Vivian's twisted imagination. Someone even called Child Protective Services with bogus reports about unsafe living conditions, forcing Elena to take time off work for a home inspection that found absolutely nothing. The caseworker apologized profusely, explaining they were legally required to investigate all reports, no matter how obviously frivolous. Sophia's college applications were delayed due to mysterious address verification issues that somehow only affected our household. The girl was maintaining straight A's while dealing with harassment that would break most adults, and I was proud of her resilience even as my fury burned hotter every day. The property damage escalated that Friday night. I woke to find our mailbox destroyed by unknown vandals, though Marcus's cameras clearly showed 2 HOA board members with a baseball bat at 3 a.m. My expensive landscaping had been poisoned with herbicide, leaving brown patches that spelled out "Move" in dying St. Augustine grass. Garden hoses were cut in multiple locations, flooding our basement storage with 3 inches of muddy water. The final insult was paint thrown at our house siding from the road, bright orange splashes visible from the subdivision entrance like some kind of suburban scarlet letter. The symbolism was obvious: mark the troublemaker's house so everyone would know which neighbor was causing community problems. During my construction years, I'd learned that when people resort to vandalism and intimidation, they're usually operating under serious time pressure. Vivian's increasingly desperate tactics suggested she was facing a deadline I didn't fully understand yet. The community was splitting like a cell dividing. Vivian's emergency HOA meeting to expel disruptive members devolved into a shouting match when Dr. Hernandez demanded financial transparency. Marcus openly challenged the board's authority to fine residents for made-up violations. Janet's questions about shell company expenditures reduced the treasurer to stammering excuses. 3 more families formally withdrew from HOA membership, citing financial irregularities and systematic harassment of residents. The exodus was accelerating as neighbors realized they could simply opt out of Vivian's dictatorship by refusing to pay assessments. Social media warfare reached fever pitch with fake accounts posting inflammatory comments and false information about our family. Elena received private messages threatening her job and our safety. Sophia was bullied at school by children whose parents had drunk Vivian's Kool-Aid. But something beautiful was happening beneath the surface chaos. Law enforcement was finally paying attention. The sheriff's deputy who'd witnessed our mailbox destruction filed an official report and requested increased patrols. He recognized several HOA supporters from previous domestic violence calls, which explained their comfort with intimidation tactics. Saturday evening, I stood on our back porch watching another security patrol drive slowly past our house, their cigarette smoke drifting across our property line like territorial marking. Elena joined me, her hand finding mine in the gathering darkness. "She's going to try something bigger," Elena said quietly. "I can feel it." "Good," I replied, thinking about Catherine's legal trap and Jake's towing trucks waiting in the shadows. Let her dig the hole deeper. Vivian's final gambit came disguised as community volunteerism. She organized what she called Community Action Day, a grassroots beautification project that would bring neighbors together to restore proper property standards. The Facebook event page looked wholesome enough, families working together to improve shared spaces, complete with promises of barbecue and lemonade. What the event description didn't mention was the real agenda. 20-plus neighbors armed with bolt cutters, sledgehammers, and enough righteous indignation to level a small building. Their target was every survey marker, security camera, and private property sign on my land. Saturday morning arrived with the ominous rumble of pickup trucks and SUVs converging on our road like some kind of suburban militia. The smell of gasoline from chainsaws and the metallic clank of tools being unloaded filled the air as Vivian's volunteers prepared for what she euphemistically called emergency community maintenance. I'd been expecting this escalation for weeks. Marcus had positioned himself strategically with video equipment, while Rex coordinated with the sheriff's department. Elena and Sophia were safely visiting Elena's sister in Austin. No point having them witness what was about to unfold. Vivian emerged from her BMW like a general inspecting troops, clipboard in hand and bolt cutters gleaming in the morning sun. She'd even brought matching t-shirts reading Willow Brook Pride for her demolition crew. The woman had turned property destruction into a team-building exercise. "Morning, neighbors," she called out cheerfully, her voice carrying across the property line with practiced real estate enthusiasm. "Ready to bring this corner of our community up to proper standards?" The crowd cheered like they were at a tailgate party instead of planning felony trespassing and vandalism. Watching grown adults prepare to destroy private property while wearing matching outfits was surreal enough to make Salvador Dali jealous. That's when I walked out with my video camera, and the sheriff's deputy Marcus had quietly summoned. Deputy Rodriguez was a no-nonsense veteran who'd been documenting Vivian's escalating behavior for 3 weeks. His presence transformed the cheerful demolition party into an awkward standoff. "Folks need to step back from the property line," Rodriguez announced, his hand resting casually on his radio. "This is private land, and you're currently trespassing." Vivian's response was pure theater. She clutched her bolt cutters like a weapon and screamed about harassment of tax-paying citizens, while her volunteers shuffled nervously behind her. The woman actually accused the deputy of being in my pocket, apparently forgetting that questioning law enforcement integrity in Texas is generally considered poor life strategy. "This man is destroying our community," she shrieked, pointing at me with the bolt cutters like some deranged conductor. "We have every right to protect our property values." Deputy Rodriguez's patience had limits. When Vivian stepped onto my land with cutting tools while screaming threats, he'd seen enough. The metallic click of handcuffs echoed across the sudden silence as 2 of her most enthusiastic volunteers joined her in receiving citations for criminal trespassing. But here's where Vivian's media strategy backfired spectacularly. She'd called a local TV news crew expecting a sympathetic story about community improvement being blocked by a selfish neighbor. Instead, they filmed her getting arrested while holding bolt cutters and ranting about property rights. Reporter Sarah Sawyer, who'd been quietly investigating our story for weeks, interviewed both sides but focused her questions on environmental violations and municipal corruption. Vivian's on-camera meltdown included admissions about forcing property sales and bringing non-conforming neighbors into compliance that would make federal prosecutors very happy. The footage of her supporters vandalizing private property while wearing matching t-shirts was comedy gold. Nothing says grassroots community movement like coordinated uniforms and professional demolition tools. Vivian spent 72 hours in county jail because her bond was set at $50,000 and her accounts were frozen pending fraud investigation. Her mugshot appeared on the evening news alongside Sarah Sawyer's report about systematic HOA corruption and environmental crime. The woman who'd spent 3 years terrorizing neighbors was finally getting the public attention she'd always craved. The financial empire collapse accelerated like dominoes falling in an earthquake. Banks froze Vivian's shell company accounts pending fraud investigations. 3 families received foreclosure notices on properties managed by her development partnerships. The HOA's insurance company canceled their policy due to criminal activity exclusions, leaving board members personally liable for all judgments. Meanwhile, Janet's investigation had uncovered the smoking gun. Vivian had embezzled $127,000 from community improvement funds to make loan payments on her failing property investments. The annual HOA audit had been conducted by her brother-in-law's accounting firm, which explained how the theft went undetected for 2 years. 15 families demanded an emergency board meeting to elect new leadership. Dr. Hernandez was nominated for president by acclamation, while Marcus and Janet agreed to serve as financial oversight committee. The new board's first act was offering formal apologies to harassment victims and implementing transparency measures for all financial decisions. The federal investigation kicked into high gear when the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit opened a case based on EPA referrals. Grand jury subpoenas were issued for 3 years of HOA financial records, shell company bank statements, and all communications between Vivian and Commissioner Morse. That evening, I stood in our restored, peaceful backyard, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and purple. The constant rumble of traffic had been replaced by evening bird songs and the distant laughter of children playing in properly supervised areas. Elena squeezed my hand, her wedding ring catching the last light of day. "It's really over, isn't it?" she asked softly. "Almost," I replied, thinking about Jake Morrison's towing trucks positioned strategically around the subdivision. One more surprise for anyone still supporting her criminal enterprise. The federal courthouse in downtown Dallas was packed like a championship football game. Vivian Ashworth's sentencing hearing had drawn over 200 community members, investigative reporters, and federal prosecutors who'd built their case around my meticulously documented evidence. The marble hallways echoed with nervous whispers and the clicking of news cameras as people filed into Judge Patricia Morrison's courtroom. I sat in the front row with Elena and Sophia, surrounded by our allies who'd become genuine friends through this ordeal. Marcus wore his dress uniform doctor. Hernandez clutched a folder of medical testimony, and Janet had organized a support group of 12 other families who'd suffered under Vivian's reign of terror. The air smelled like nervous sweat and expensive lawyer cologne. Judge Morrison entered with the gravity of someone about to pronounce sentence on organized crime. The federal prosecutors had presented 847 pieces of evidence over 3 days, including every photograph, video clip, and document Rex and I had compiled during months of harassment. Vivian's court-appointed attorney looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. The victim impact statements began with Elena describing workplace intimidation and threats against our family. Her voice remained steady as she explained how Vivian had weaponized her career and terrorized our teenage daughter. The emotional weight in that courtroom was thick enough to cut with a knife. Dr. Hernandez testified about stress-related medical treatment required by multiple residents who'd been systematically harassed and intimidated. Marcus presented his military perspective on proportional response, explaining how Vivian's tactics violated basic principles of civilized conflict resolution. 12 other families shared similar stories of intimidation, financial extortion, and property rights violations. The pattern was undeniable. Vivian hadn't just targeted me. She'd been running a criminal enterprise designed to terrorize homeowners into selling their property at below-market prices. When Vivian's turn came to speak, her court-appointed attorney attempted a plea for leniency, citing financial desperation and community pressure. But Vivian couldn't help herself. She interrupted with a rambling speech about property values and community standards that made her sound like a broken real estate advertisement. "Your Honor, I was protecting innocent families from hostile neighbors who refused to follow reasonable community guidelines," she declared, her voice rising with each word. "These people wanted to drag down everyone's investments with their selfish behavior." Judge Morrison allowed 15 minutes of increasingly incoherent accusations before cutting her off. Watching Vivian rant about property values while facing federal prison time was like watching someone complain about parking tickets during a murder trial. The evidence presentation was devastating. Catherine Silverman's timeline showed systematic criminal behavior escalating from harassment to property destruction to environmental crimes. Security footage played on courtroom monitors showing vandalism, intimidation, and midnight construction violations. Financial records revealed $340,000 in embezzled funds from multiple sources. The environmental expert testified about permanent ecological damage from illegal wetland construction. Federal law treats environmental crimes seriously, especially when combined with municipal corruption and racketeering charges. The prosecution had built an airtight case that would serve as a textbook example for future prosecutors. Judge Morrison's explanation of criminal forfeiture was music to my ears. Vivian would surrender all property purchased with crime proceeds, including her house, investment properties, and the BMW that had already been repossessed. The forfeited assets would compensate victims and fund environmental restoration. When the judge announced an 8-year federal sentence, the courtroom erupted in applause that echoed off marble walls like thunder. Vivian's face went white as the reality of federal prison hit her. Commissioner Morse had already received 5 years in a separate trial, and 3 city officials were pleading guilty for reduced sentences. The media coverage was immediate and extensive. Sarah Sawyer's live broadcast reached 2.3 million viewers across Texas as she explained how one homeowner's documentation had exposed municipal corruption and environmental crime. National networks picked up the story as an example of HOA abuse and citizen advocacy success. The environmental victory exceeded my wildest expectations. Federal court ordered $2.1 million in wetland restoration funded by criminal forfeiture. My property would become the northern boundary of a new protected wildlife corridor. The EPA would use our case as a model for prosecuting future environmental crimes involving municipal corruption. The property rights precedent was equally significant. Rockwell versus Willowbrook Commons HOA would be cited in law schools and courthouses across America. The Texas legislature was already introducing the Property Owner Protection Act based on our case details. Judge Morrison's final remarks addressed the packed courtroom with the weight of constitutional authority. This case represents everything wrong, with unchecked authority and systematic neighbor harassment. Mr. Rockwell's patience and documentation saved this community from years more abuse. Let this sentence serve as warning. Property rights are not negotiable in America. The financial reckoning was swift and complete. Civil lawsuit settlements awarded me $480,000 in damages and attorney fees. RICO treble damages were applied to all documented harassment and property damage. The HOA's insurance company paid additional environmental restoration costs. As federal marshals led Vivian away in handcuffs, she was still claiming she'd been protecting property values. Her last words to the media were predictably self-serving. "This is all his fault," while pointing at me like a petulant child caught stealing cookies. Outside the courthouse, Elena and I stood in afternoon sunshine surrounded by friends and neighbors who'd stood with us against organized crime disguised as community management. The sweet taste of justice was better than any victory I'd experienced during my construction career. "Ready to go home?" Elena asked, squeezing my hand. "More than ready," I replied, thinking about the peaceful gravel road waiting for us. "Let's go celebrate freedom. Justice tastes sweetest when shared with people who deserve it most. That's why I donated $200,000 of the settlement money to establish the Willowbrook Veterans Scholarship, a fund providing college assistance for military families in our community. Elena was appointed to the scholarship board alongside Dr. Hernandez and Marcus, turning our alliance of necessity into a partnership for positive change. The first scholarship recipient was the son of a neighbor who'd supported us throughout the ordeal. Watching that young man receive his check while his veteran father wiped away tears in our community center reminded me why this fight had been worth every sleepless night and legal fee. The sweet smell of Elena's homemade cookies filled the room as families celebrated together. The environmental restoration exceeded everyone's wildest expectations. Within 6 months, workers had completed the wetland rehabilitation ahead of schedule and under budget. Protected Miller's Creek now supports returning wildlife, including rare painted buntings that hadn't been seen in our area for decades. Their morning songs drift across our property like nature's own victory celebration, replacing the diesel rumble of Vivian's construction crews. My gravel road became part of the restoration plan. designated as a low-impact nature trail connecting the subdivision to the new wildlife preserve. Families now walk their children along the same path Vivian had tried to steal, learning about environmental protection and property rights from educational signs funded by her criminal forfeiture money. The irony is delicious. Sophia received a full scholarship to the University of Texas engineering program after her essay about standing up to bullies and protecting what's right won a statewide writing contest. She wants to specialize in environmental engineering, inspired by watching our wetland restoration process. Elena's promotion to assistant superintendent came with district-wide recognition for her leadership during our crisis. The family vacation to Alaska we'd postponed during the legal battle was finally funded by documentary appearance fees. Watching grizzly bears fish for salmon while Sophia planned her college courses felt like the perfect reward for surviving suburban warfare. Elena's laughter echoing across pristine wilderness was the sweetest sound I'd heard in years. Property values told the real story of our victory. Our house increased 45% in value following the corruption exposure and environmental restoration. Neighboring properties gained value due to proximity to the protected wildlife corridor. The area rebranded itself as Willowbrook Conservation Community, a name that actually meant something beyond real estate marketing. The legal reforms our case inspired became the Texas Property Owner Protection Act, signed into law with bipartisan support. The legislation requires HOAs to carry $2 million liability insurance for officer misconduct, establishes a state ombudsman office for property rights disputes, and criminalizes harassment campaigns targeting individual homeowners. Vivian's criminal legacy became the foundation for protecting future families. Jake Morrison's towing business grew 300% after publicity from our case, specializing in HOA accountability services that make corrupt boards very nervous. Sarah Sawyer's Emmy-winning documentary Neighborhood Nightmare was viewed by 15 million households, inspiring property rights legislation in 12 states. The community transformation was remarkable. Dr. Hernandez was elected HOA president with 89% of the vote, implementing transparent governance that published monthly budgets online. Annual dues dropped from $2,400 to $400 per household after eliminating corruption and contractor kickbacks. Marcus and Rex formed a private investigation partnership that has helped 37 families fight HOA abuse across Texas. 3 families who nearly lost their homes to Vivian's foreclosure schemes used restitution payments to save their properties. The community center built in Vivian's former house now hosts conflict resolution training, a beautiful example of turning criminal real estate into community good. Our 3rd annual Freedom Road Festival last month drew over 500 attendees from across the state who wanted to celebrate the power of standing up to bullies. The smell of barbecue smoke and sound of children's laughter filled the air as families enjoyed bounce houses set up exactly where Vivian's security guard used to harass visitors. As I write this, Elena and I are planning semi-retirement that might include consulting for families facing similar HOA harassment. Rex is already investigating corruption in 3 other Texas communities, and we joke about starting a traveling roadshow for property rights education. The sound of children playing on our restored gravel road during festivals perfectly captures what we fought to protect, their laughter mixing with bird songs from the protected wetland, exactly as we dreamed when we first bought our little piece of American freedom. Got your own HOA nightmare story? Share it in the comments below. You never know who might need to hear that they're not alone in this fight. And don't forget to subscribe to HOA Stories for more David versus Goliath property rights victories. Next week, I'll tell you about Margaret Thompson, the 72-year-old grandmother in Oregon who used a medieval property law called adverse possession to seize her corrupt city council's parking lot. Sometimes the best revenge really is living well and keeping detailed records. Faced by the satisfaction of community leadership and the sweet smell of desert mornings without gasoline fumes. Most importantly, I learned that patience and persistence always defeat petty tyrants, especially when you document everything and know your legal rights. Remember, your HOA dues aren't their personal piggy bank, and renewable energy installations are protected by law in most states. Drop a comment sharing your worst HOA horror story, and don't forget to subscribe to HOA Stories for more tales of neighborhood justice and Karen comeuppance.